My name is Ellen Holste. I am the Community Program Manager at Cedar Creek Institute. So welcome to our virtual Lunch and Learn. We're going to talk about counting on saving the birds. Our speaker today is Lindsay Cain from Michigan Audubon. She's their education coordinator, I believe is your title, correct? I've known Lindsay for a few years now. But she was just telling me that she got her Michigan Young Birders Network up, which is so exciting because I think that's the main reason that I first contacted you, Lindsay, correct?
Yeah.
So anyway, Lindsay, very knowledgeable on birds. So I am so excited for this talk, and I'm going to stop talking and let you start. So thank you, Lindsay, for being here.
Perfect. Thanks, Ellen. I'm really excited to be here too. I typically actually am on the other end of things. I'm normally in Ellen's position, so it's kind of fun to be in the speaker position here to talk to you guys about a topic that is really kind of fun for me to be able to talk about. So as Ellen said, my name is Lindsay. I'm the education coordinator at Michigan Audubon. I have been with the organization for quite some time now, and I'm really excited to share a little bit about what we do. So if you don't know, Michigan Audubon connects birds and people for the benefit of both through conservation, education, and research efforts in the state of Michigan. So we are a statewide organization. We are a member organization, so you may or may not be a member. If you are a member, great. You might know a little bit about what I'm talking about then. If you're not, you're welcome to join us, of course. But we work throughout the state of Michigan through these three pillars: conservation, education, and research. And I'm kind of lucky today to be talking to you in the capacity of all three of those pillars. So I want to point out that our conservation efforts are quite broad, but within those conservation efforts, we do have 18 bird sanctuaries throughout the state of Michigan. So you can see them here on the map. They are all open to the public year-round during daylight hours from dawn until dusk. And they are really great places to be able to go birding. The really cool thing, it's almost 4,000 acres of protected land throughout the state, and it covers a wide variety of habitats. So there's lots of opportunities for bird species to be able to nest, breed, overwinter, shelter, stop during their migrations. You can see from the map, the majority of them are in the lower part of the Lower Peninsula, which is great for all of you if you live in that area, which I'm guessing probably are mostly in that area since you're here through Cedar Creek Institute. But I want to specifically talk to you about one of these sanctuaries and great pieces of habitat that is in the Hastings area, the Otis Farm Bird Sanctuary. And if you haven't been there, I encourage you guys to go check it out. It is actually in my top 2 favorite nature places ever. I love going to Otis. I love that I get to spend some time out there. And there are some really nice trails. There's a parking area. You're welcome to go check out the wetlands, the grasslands. There's upland habitat too. Lots of different birds, really cool things all year round. Here's a couple other pictures for you too from when I was out there in the fall. Really cool, really great, beautiful every season of the year, even in the winter. So you're welcome to check that out. It might even be a good opportunity for you to check out Otis Farm Bird Sanctuary during the Great Backyard Bird Count, which is what I'm here to talk to you about today. So the Great Backyard Bird Count is exactly like it sounds. It is a backyard bird count, and it's meant for anyone to be able to participate. I think that it's really cool that it doesn't matter where you are, what your skill level is, what you know. There's lots to learn, and there's lots for you to be able to participate in. So this is the 24th annual Great Backyard Bird Count, and it will be held February 12th through the 15th. They pick 4 consecutive days in mid-February every year to have this Great Backyard Bird Count. The Great Backyard Bird Count itself was started in 1998 by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and National Audubon Society, and it's been going strong since then. It was the first citizen or community science project online that collected data on wild birds and reported those results in real time. So it started as a nationwide count, but has grown to a worldwide bird count. So Birds Canada joined the project in 2009, adding Canada to the area, and it became a global project in 2013. In 2013, they also started using eBird for their data reporting, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit about as well. But this is the world's largest biodiversity-related citizen or community science project that there is. So you may be more familiar with it being referred to as citizen science, but there's been a push recently to refer to it as community science, because that's really what it is. It's data collection and or analysis that's done by the general public, like you and me, in partnership with professional scientists. So a few years ago, I did a school program with a group of fifth graders, and I was talking to them about citizen science at the time. Community science is really kind of newer. And I was talking to them about citizen science and whether or not scientists could be everywhere at once. And of course, they reminded me in the best way possible that yes, scientists can be everywhere because you and I can be scientists. So it's our job to help professional scientists collect data by participating in these community science projects. Community science is a huge proponent, or Michigan Audubon is a huge proponent of community science as a form of research within the state of Michigan. It's something that everybody can and should participate in. And so I'd like to tell you a little bit more about this specific community science project. Why should you participate? Well, I'm sure you all love your birds. Who doesn't love birds, right? They're fun, they're great to be able to watch. You don't need a lot of tools or skills to be able to watch them. Of course, binoculars can help, but you can also watch them in your backyard, and there's always more to learn. I know a lot about birds, but I am still very much a beginning birder and still learning a lot about birds on a regular basis. But we want to make sure that our birds are counted. It's really important that we know what is happening to our bird populations, species, both species distribution and individual distribution. It can really help with long-term records of birds, which helps us find out more about migration patterns, year-to-year changes, any long-term trends. A lot of people, so I don't know how long you all have been watching the birds in your own backyard, but a lot of people are reporting that they have seen a decrease in the amount of birds in their backyards. And projects like the Great Backyard Bird Count can help contribute to that data, which is really important because then you have actual numbers to go along with that anecdotal evidence so that we can really determine what's happening to our birds. The great thing about birds and the hard thing about birds is that birds can fly. They don't stay in one spot. So it can be a lot harder to count them all than, say, for example, plants, right? Plants don't move on you. You can count in one area and you know what's there. You can take a full census a lot easier than you can with birds because birds move. It's part of the reason we like to watch them so much, but it also makes it really difficult for us to be able to record observations and know what the full population looks like. So participating in the Great Backyard Bird Count can help make sure that your birds specifically are counted when looking at these big census records across not only the country, but globally. So again, the Great Backyard Bird Count is this year on February 12th through the 15th. It's really quite simple to participate. You just have to observe, identify, count, and report your birds. And you can do this through two different platforms, either eBird or Merlin. These are both platforms that are run by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And you do have to create a free account to be able to report the data, but it is free and it's the same account for all of these different platforms through the Cornell lab. Their website is birdcount.org. I wanted to make sure I got that on here a couple of times for you guys in case you wanted to be able to see it. But it's cool because by utilizing eBird, you can actually see all of the birds being recorded and reported throughout the Great Backyard Bird Count. So on their website at birdcount.org, you can actually see a live map once the Great Backyard Bird Count starts, and you'll be able to see, it will start in this same direction because they hit those dates first, and you'll just start to see these spots light up on the map so that you can see where the birds are being reported and recorded. You can even see what those are. So in 2020, there were an estimated 268,674 participants. Over 27 million birds were counted, and close to 7,000 species of birds were identified in a total of 194 countries. So each year these numbers grow, and you can be part of that as well. Let's talk more about the process of how the Great Backyard Bird Count works. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to pick a location. The best part about this count is there aren't any restrictions. You can pick any place you are, your backyard, your neighborhood, a park, a local nature area. You can do it from inside, you can go outside and go for a walk. It doesn't really matter. But you want to keep in mind that this is what I use for younger children, especially. To see a bird, you want to be a bird. I have a 3-year-old and he hasn't quite mastered that be a bird phase of the bird watching. And so he sees a bird, and when he sees a bird, the bird no longer is seen because he's so excited. So you want to move slowly and you want to try to blend in. The best way to do that is by keeping your distance and being quiet, kind of like an owl in flight. Owls have those specialized feathers so that they're not making a lot of noise. So you want to channel your inner owl and keep your distance and listen to what's happening so that you can make those observations before you get too close to the birds. Once you find the bird, you have to be able to identify it. So Merlin, which is one of the ways you can report data, is also a handy dandy tool for identifying birds if you don't know all of your birds. And it follows the same general pattern that we utilize when we try to identify birds. The first thing you want to do is you want to look at the size and the shape of the bird. So a lot of times birds are described by their size. Bigger than a sparrow, but smaller than a robin, or bigger than a robin, but smaller than a crow, or larger than a goose. There's not a lot of birds that are larger than geese. So you want to look at that size and shape. Size is the first thing you want to use to help narrow down what kind of bird it is, but then also the shape. You start to notice the more you look at the birds that different birds have different shapes. Sparrows have a very specific shape. Wrens have a very specific shape. So if you can start with that size and shape, you can start to narrow down what bird you're looking at. From there, you want to look at its color pattern. Of course, you're probably familiar with some birds' very unique color patterns. A robin, for example, it's got that buff reddish chest and belly with the darker gray wings. So you know that those colors identify that bird. You also want to look at its behavior and its habitat. And Merlin actually takes you through these steps as well to be able to help identify the bird. And once you get through it, it shows you some potential options for what bird it might be. You can also use a field guide in the same way. Once you start narrowing these things down, it becomes easier to identify the birds. So once you identify your birds, you're going to count them. So when you're counting birds for the Great Backyard Bird Count, they ask that you spend at least 15 minutes counting birds. So you can't just see a bird and report it. You want to spend at least 15 minutes watching your bird feeder, watching your backyard, going for a walk to be able to identify as many birds as you can in that 15 minutes or longer. Longer is always fine. And keep track of the amount of time that you spend birding. So while you're out counting these birds, you're observing and identifying during this time, you're going to make the best estimate you can of how many birds you see of each species. This can be really challenging for some people because depending on where you are, you might have flocks of birds coming through. Huge flocks are a challenge. They're a challenge for everyone, but you're going to use your best guess and it's still going to be really valuable. So if you have a really large flock, you can estimate. If you know that there's 10 birds in, this much of the sky and the whole sky is full, you can start to determine how many slices of sky there are and multiply that by 10. Now, the great thing about starting with the Great Backyard Bird Count, if you're not really comfortable with counting birds, is we don't typically have those large flocks here in Michigan. And so that can help as you get started. You also want to try and pay attention to the amount of individuals you have. So some species are really easy to tell apart because you can see the difference between males and females. And so it can help you understand how many individuals there are. Whereas other species are a little bit more challenging to be able to determine how many individuals there are. So for example, in this picture here, there are 2 species. Which species are you seeing? Go ahead and throw them in the chat for me. Anybody? Juncos and cardinals, perfect. Yeah, so you've got both northern cardinal and dark-eyed junco in this picture. The cardinals, you can tell the difference between the males and the females. So there are 2 female and a male that you can see clearly in this picture. Actually, now that I say that, I've got myself covering part of that. Yeah, that's it. So there are 3 cardinals for sure. If all of those cardinals show up at once, it's really easy to determine. Let's say you see these 3 cardinals, and then while you're still standing there, they fly away and more come back. And this time there are 3 females. Well, that way, there are actually 4 individuals because you have that 1 male and these 2 females, and then you have a 3rd female. There could be more, but for sure there were 4 different individuals. So your number would be 4. You don't want to recount the same birds over and over again if you can help it. Dark-eyed junco is a little bit more difficult because you can't really tell the difference between the males and the females this time of year. And so they all look very similar. This is also true about a lot of different species. So you count the biggest number that you see at one time. So if you have 2 dark-eyed junco and then they fly away and 4 come back, you don't add 4 to your total, you add 2 more, so 4 total. I know it's a little bit confusing, but we can talk more about that if you have questions later. So you want to do your best to get your best estimate of the amount of birds that are in the location that you are birding at that point in time. And when you're done counting, you're going to enter your list or lists online. And you can do this. Sorry, my computer's being a little slow. There it is. You can do this by recording and reporting through eBird or through Merlin. And you can do this both in real time or later. So to create a new checklist, or you're going to want to create a new checklist for each new day. So there are 4 days total. You're welcome to go out every day or just one of the 4. You want to make a new checklist for each different location. So if you're birding in different areas, you want to create different checklists for each of those areas. And if you're birding in the same location on the same day, but at a different time of day. So maybe you spend some time watching the feeder in your backyard for 20 minutes in the morning, and then again, 20 minutes in the evening. Those are going to be 2 separate checklists. So you can report your data through Merlin, which is that ID app, through eBird on their website, or through eBird on the mobile app. I really like to use eBird as an app, but that's also because I understand how to use it. The first couple of times I started using it, it was really overwhelming to me until I kind of figured it out. But now that I figured it out, hopefully I'll be able to make that make sense for all of you too. But the great part about using the app is that it all happens in real time, so you don't have to go back and do it. But you can. That's what the web page is for, and it's very easy to be able to do that as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about how you report it. So both through the eBird app and through the eBird website, you're going to go through the same typical process. Merlin, I'll be completely honest, I don't use Merlin. It takes up a lot of space on your phone, and I don't have the space for it right now. So I don't use Merlin, but Merlin works very similar to the way that that you identify those birds through those steps. You utilize it, and then it asks you if you want to report it to eBird, and it directly reports it. So you don't have to go through all of the same steps here. So I'm going to focus on eBird just because that's probably still your easiest way to report the data. But Merlin does talk to eBird, so you can use that as well. So when you start on eBird, you're going to first identify the location that you're making your observations. So if you use eBird, there are locations stored from places that you've been before, and you can just check them in that drop-down menu here from the choose from your locations. If you're new to eBird, or if you're birding in a different spot than you normally would, then you're going to want to find it on the map. So you can do this. I find that it can be easiest to do this by looking up a county in Michigan. So you can see here, I typed in Barry for Barry County to be able to get to the locations that are on the map. So if you're using the app, it will actually grab your latitude and longitude from where you are and use your location services to determine where you are. So you don't have to go through all of this, but it's still going to ask you where you're birding from. So you can either tell it to check that, or you can pick one through the same type of format. So once you pick the area, it's going to bring up a map of all of the hot spots in that area. So for this one, I actually clicked on the Otis Sanctuary hotspot. You'll see it says in my chosen location here. You can also search places. So you can search by name, address, or the lat-long coordinates and be able to get to the same area. But you can see all of these little bubbles are hotspots. So once you pick your location, so I picked Otis Sanctuary, then it's going to ask you for your date and effort. So you want to tell them what day you are doing your observation. Again, through the mobile app, it's going to be a little bit easier because it's going to just assume this is all happening in real time. But through the website, you're going to pick your observation date. So whether that was today or yesterday or a week ago or 3 years ago, even, actually, you can put in historical data as well. And then you're going to pick the observation type. So traveling or stationary are going to be the two different observation types for the Great Backyard Bird Count. And that is dependent on whether you're going to walk along a trail or through your neighborhood, or if you're going to stay in a fixed location, like watching from your window, watching your bird feeder, something like that. So you're going to pick, after you put in your observation date, whether it was traveling or stationary. If you pick one of these other options, they don't actually count as part of the Great Backyard Bird Count, but those are also options for for different situations. So once you pick whether it's traveling or stationary, it's going to ask you what time you started and how long you were out birding. So if it's a stationary or fixed location, you won't have a distance. It'll just ask you for your start time and how long you were out birding. It's really important that you record how long you were birding, because that helps us, help scientists later know how many birds per minute or hour we're seeing, and it can help make them more comparable to one another. If, for example, I was out for 15 minutes and you were out for an hour, you know, our overall effort is different, and so we're going to get probably a different number of birds, and it can help with that distribution and abundance of the birds that we're seeing. So you put in your start time, you put in your duration, how long you were out there. You don't have to be super exact. Be as specific as you can, but use your judgment when you're making estimates as well. It's really okay, and it makes the data a lot more usable for a lot more research opportunities and questions that people want to ask. If it was a traveling observation, you're going to want to put in your distance. The cool thing about using the app is that it will record your distance, and so you don't have to know how far you were out walking. But if not, it's not that hard to figure out how far you walked to be able to observe all of these birds. So you want to put in that distance to the best of your knowledge. And then how many people you were out with. So if it was just yourself, you just put in 1. If there was a group of 3 of you, you put in 3, so that they know how many people were out birding. There's also room for comments if you want to add those there. So once you do that and put in all of that information, you're going to get a list of birds. You're going to tell them what you saw or what you heard. So it breaks them down into groups, and you just can go ahead and go in and go down the list and add numbers. The other thing you can do is over here, there's a search function that says jump to species. If you start typing in the species there, it will keep populating it, and it will take you directly to it, so you don't have to go through that huge list. I know I still have trouble because birds are listed in a very specific way, and sometimes I forget where do I find owls on that list. So I can just type something into that jump to species, and it will automatically bring it up. You can also do that on the app, which is really nice. So you want to do that to determine or to record how many species you saw. You can also look at the list alphabetically if you want. You can show rarities and show subspecies. You can check this box to see the group that's most likely. So the great thing about eBird is there are people who are reviewing this data, and they make it hard to report something that is very unlikely. So things that are not rare. For example, Berry County is great in the late spring, early summer, because Berry County has cerulean warbler. You can't find cerulean warbler anywhere else in Michigan. And so you can put in cerulean warbler during May and June, and it doesn't flag it. If you try to record that you saw a cerulean warbler today, it's going to flag that report, and it won't be posted until it goes through a review process by the reviewers. And they're going to ask for photos and clear identification to be able to know that that's the case, because it's not very common. So it's really cool in that it's a lot harder to make one of those that's a really bad mistake if you're reporting a rarity, misreporting a rarity, I should say, because that can bring birders from all over the world to try and see a bird that shouldn't be there. We don't want to do that if that's not the case either. So it is nice because there are some checks and balances here. So once you put in all of the birds that you've seen, recorded all of the individuals, and put in a number for each bird species that you've seen, you're going to submit your checklist. This question right here asks if you're submitting a complete checklist of the birds that you were able to identify. Now, I really want to emphasize that it says the birds you were able to identify. This does not mean that you identified every single bird in that area. If you're really not good at being able to identify birds by sound, you might have heard something and you have no idea what it is, so you didn't report it. That's okay. It's still a complete checklist because you identified everything that you were able to. If there's a way for you to figure out what it is, try your best, but you just want to report species that you know for sure because you don't want to inflate the data with potential wrong species just because. So if you've identified every bird that you possibly can, and I mean you, yourself, with your own skill set, then it's considered a complete checklist and you can submit the checklist by clicking yes and pushing submit. If you mark it as no, it's not a complete checklist, it's also not going to be very helpful for the Great Backyard Bird Count. The Great Backyard Bird Count relies on complete checklists, so being able to identify as many birds as possible. If you're just have an incidental sighting, like for example, if I just wanted to report the Cooper's hawk that hangs out in my neighborhood, that's not, it's just an incidental sighting and it's not a complete checklist because I'm not trying to identify any other birds. It's cool to know, but it's not really helpful when it comes to research and being able to help with the data set that they're building through the Great Backyard Bird Count. So once you submit your checklist, you'll be able to review your checklist and even edit it. So that's the really cool thing. You can change it, you can edit it, you can delete it. So if you want to practice before the Great Backyard Bird Count, you can go in and you can go through all of these steps and you can put some things in and you can delete the checklist after you're done. But when you're done, you end up with a checklist like this. So I pulled the checklist from this summer because I wanted to show you what it looked like and some cool things about using the app. So this is a checklist that I created using the app on my phone. I went out birding and when I started, so this is my start dot here. When I started, I got on my phone, I clicked the location data. This is a hotspot that's near our office. That's at actually one of the middle schools where I work with some fifth graders and a fifth grade teacher. I clicked on my phone where I was in Kinawa Woods, and I went and I identified as many birds as I could see. I have a super long list because it is, you know, the end of June at 11 o'clock in the morning, which is not the best time to be birding. But I was able to see 12 species and 19 different individuals. And you can see that because I was traveling and I had my GPS on, you can actually see my weird walking path here. There are trails out there, and so I was following those around. But it recorded how long I was out there in both time and distance. So it was really nice to be able to utilize my phone to be able to do that. So I do encourage you to try that because it is and can be really helpful. Now, if you submitted this data and you were looking at your list and you realized that you somehow clicked the wrong species, you can go back in and either remove it using these delete trash can icons, or you can edit the species. You also have the option to add media. So you can add photos or videos of any of these birds that you're seeing. This is really important for anything that may potentially be flagged as uncommon or rare. Those files help to show the reviewer that that is really what you saw and what you were seeing when you were out birding. So now you have the ability to be able to go out in your own backyard and or neighborhood or any area really and help contribute to this really large data set that helps to record global bird populations and distribution. So there is information on the Michigan Audubon website. There's also a lot of really great resources at birdcount.org including information about eBird. And there is an eBird tutorial that's available that's free of charge, which can be really helpful for people who are just getting started with utilizing eBird to be able to help them feel comfortable to be able to report their data to the website. There are a lot of people out there who prefer to record data on paper. If you are one of those people, great. But once you do that, I encourage you to go back afterwards so that you can submit your data to eBird so that it can be utilized by people around the world to be able to answer questions about birds and help study birds and better serve them as best as we can. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
So we definitely have some questions in both the chat box as well as in the Q&A. One person was wondering, so he says, my bird count through the Kalamazoo Nature Center for typical species other than English sparrows is way off this year. He says, these birds are birds that come to my feeders. Are other people having the same problem? I don't know. I can throw that to people, other participants, but also maybe to you. I think you were saying that you might see evening grosbeaks, but what other birds that might be way off this year?
Yeah, so this year is actually a really strange year in that we're having an eruptive year, but that should mean that you've seen more birds that you're not normally seeing, not less. However, it is quite common that we get emails and phone calls at Michigan Audubon from individuals who are saying they are seeing less birds. And we know that bird populations are in decline. We've lost 2.9 billion birds since 1970. That's a lot of birds. There are huge contributing factors to bird populations throughout our world, both on a small scale and a large scale. And so this unfortunately is not uncommon to me. I hear this a lot, and I really encourage people when they say this to me to participate in things like the Great Backyard Bird Count, because it helps have that data on record so that we can really see that. And the more data we have on record, the better we can fight for our birds and try to determine what is really happening. So unfortunately, I don't have a good answer as to why it's happening or what the solution is, but counting your birds, reporting your data is really crucial to helping us find an answer to this problem.
So it's a great plug for participating in community science projects such as this one,
right,
as well as other ones. Yeah, good point. Sarah asks, if you had to recommend some of the best places around Barry County to visit, which ones would you recommend besides Otis Bird Sanctuary? We know we like that one, but what other ones would you recommend for around Barry County? I'm going to put my own plug in for Pierce Cedar Creek Institute, but I don't know if you have any others.
Yeah, Barry County is a great place to bird. Let me just say that flat out. And of course, Otis is at the top of my list because it is one of my favorite places, but Pierce Cedar Creek Institute is a great place to go birding. I have spent plenty of time out there on the trails. It's a really wonderful place to bird. We also have another sanctuary property not far from Otis called Warner Sanctuary. That's another really great place to be able to bird. But I would even go as far, and now this time of year is probably not as much the case, but I know like downtown Hastings has really great chimney swift. There's really just a plethora of options in that area. I think the best thing to do is actually utilize eBird as well, because those hotspots are all there. So if you're looking for something specific, you can check out those hotspots too. But no, Barry County is great birds, so lots of good places to bird.
Great. That's good to know. So we had another question of, do you have to participate each day or at least once a day between February 12th and 15th of this year for the Great Backyard Bird Count? So do you have to do it once at least, or how many times do you have to do it?
Right. Yeah. So that's a really great question. I'm really glad you asked that, because I know that can be a little bit confusing. You can participate once or as many times as you want. That's the best part about this. There's something for everyone, right? If you are only able to go out one day for 15 minutes, even that really supports the bird count. But if you're able to go out every day for 15 or more minutes or multiple times a day, that's even better. I know this year my goal is to get a checklist on eBird for every one of those days. So just one checklist, at least 15 minutes each of those days. That is my goal. I have yet to do that, and I work for Michigan Audubon. So you guys, any little bit helps, but it's great to be able to push yourself too.
Yeah, goals are good to have. So we're talking about the Great Backyard Bird Count. I know there's also the Christmas bird count. I don't know, are there any other bird counts out there? Somebody was saying, has there been a census on how many songbirds are killed at feeders? Are there any other counts that you would like to let us know about?
Sure. So I think that the Great Backyard Bird Count is the biggest in terms of community science and broad participation. Anyone can participate in the Great Backyard Bird Count, and you can participate in small increments or large. The Christmas bird count is a little bit more structured than the Great Backyard Bird Count. There's very specific circles, and there are groups that do it, and it's a little bit more formal of a bird count. It's still really great, and there's still opportunities for people to participate, but it is a little bit more, you have to know the right people and you have to know what you're looking for. That information is all available online, so you can get there, but it is a little bit more structured. We also have what's called Global Big Day. So there are big days in both the spring and the fall where, again, it's hosted utilizing eBird, and Cornell Lab of Ornithology is a big proponent of this and helps with the publicity and whatnot. But on Global Big Day, you go out and you count as many birds as you can on that day, and that helps with those bird census data. The thing is, though, with eBird and the opportunity to participate in community science all year at any point in time, I encourage you all to spend as much time as you can submitting data to eBird, because it is really important. We have a lot of trouble being able to census bird populations because, like I said, they fly, they move. And so the more data we can collect in more places during similar timeframes, the better picture we can start to build. And so it's really important for us to keep doing that as much as possible to grow that data set.
Good point. Yeah. So somebody did have a question. So about the Michigan Young Birders Network. But before I ask you about that, I do want to point out there is a book. It's a 2018 copyright book. So this book is called Counting Birds, The Idea That Saved Our Feathered Friends by Heidi Stempel. But this is a good way to introduce kids to, this is actually about the Christmas bird count. So it's the history behind it, why it got started. They do talk about the Great Backyard Bird Count a little bit at the end of it, but it's a good way to introduce kids to this topic of doing community science. But could you just share a little bit more info about the Michigan Young Birders Network and what that is? And I know you're really excited about it. So how did it get started? What did they do?
Yeah. Before I do that, though, I do want to point out, because this is something I didn't really emphasize, and you just reminded me, Ellen. The Great Backyard Bird Count is a really great way to also get kids started with birds. So I mentioned before, I have a 3-year-old at home, and he loves birds. He loves the birds so much that he scares them away. But we're working on that. We're trying to learn the best way to observe birds. But during this Great Backyard Bird Count, I'm going to actually have him help me with my counts. So practicing seeing the birds and identifying the birds. So it's really important for introducing young people to birds as well. This is a really great opportunity to be able to do that. And so I encourage you all to think about that as well. And that does lead into the Michigan Young Birders Network, which is officially off the ground in 2021. So as of right now, the Michigan Young Birders Network is geared towards young birders aged 13 to 18. And I have some really great high schoolers who are fully committed and helping make this all happen. But they have started um, building a social media platform and following. So you can follow the Michigan Young Birders Network on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. There is an e-newsletter that's available, which you can sign up for on the Michigan Audubon website. The first e-newsletter actually goes out next week, and they're going to start holding monthly meetings for young birders across the state on the first Wednesday of each month. And they're going to have different topics and different guest speakers who are going to come talk to them. But right now, they're also utilizing Discord, which is a chat service function, kind of like a old school chat room, except it's not the same. I don't know. I don't know if I'm dating myself or confusing people. It's both those things, but so they can talk to one another though in a controlled environment. So it's all monitored and moderated, but they can talk to one another about the things that they're seeing and places to go visit and help with IDing birds, or someone asked about window collisions. They were teaching each other about how to prevent window collisions. And so I think that it's a really cool opportunity, not only to get young birders of Michigan together, but also to learn a little bit from my perspective about how to engage more new birders who may not be young either, but just getting started.
Good points. Bobby Joe had a question that I had as well. Why February? Why a winter month for the Great Backyard Bird Count? Spring seems more like, in my brain, I think of birds in spring. So why February?
That's a really good question. And I don't know exactly why they chose that, but I can tell you my speculation as to why they chose it. So spring and fall are both really great times to go out and see birds. And that's when we do global big days, right? That's when you're seeing lots of birds up and moving, and you can get lots of population numbers that way. The problem is that during migration, they're also moving a lot. And so it's a little bit harder to have that. You may have a bird that gets counted in one part of the country in the morning, and it's in a completely different state in the evening. And so that can really mess with your distribution of birds, because like I said, they fly. It's great. They go long distances, but it can be really confusing when you're trying to track them and figure out what's happening. So I think the idea behind it is that in these winter months, you're seeing birds who are, they normally stay in a more compact territory during this time of year. The summer would be a great time too, because they're on territory they're nesting, except you don't see birds when they're nesting, because the whole point is for them to be able to protect their young, so they have to blend in. But they are, not moving quite as far a distance. And so it should theoretically help with making sure that it's a better representation of what we're seeing population wise.
So one person was asking, she's interested in attracting more birds to her yard. She prefers to use native plants for bird food and shelter instead of bird feeders and houses. Can you talk about some of the pros and cons of that idea?
Yeah, I love that idea, actually. Plants are probably native plants are a much better way to be able to help our birds. And that is actually the biggest founding component of the Michigan Bird Friendly Communities program that Michigan Audubon started a few years ago. Native plants are crucial. They provide food, they provide shelter, they provide habitat. They're really crucial for our birds and other pollinators. And so, it's really important to have those things for birds, and it does work really well. The biggest con to that is it can take time and money. I mean, taking out your whole garden space and trying to make it all native and all the types of plants that birds want can be a little bit pricey and overwhelming for people to start out with. I know. So my husband and I just bought our first house this past summer, and one of the very first things I did when we moved in, because there was landscaping here, not good landscaping, was to rip out the Japanese barberry bush, because not only are they not native, but they're also invasive. And so they're a huge problem And they're not good. They don't have anything for the birds. I also have a Rose of Sharon bush and several burning bush that are in my yard, which are also not native. They're not invasive, so they're not going to spread. So they're still here for now because I can't just go ripping all the plants out at once. I don't think my husband would like that very much, but I did slowly but surely. I mean, I ripped out the Japanese barberry, and one of my coworkers actually bought me a purple coneflower as a housewarming present, and so I put that in, and I put up a bird feeder. So I have a feeding station because it was the easiest way for me to give back to birds and get some birds into my yard in the time frame that worked for me. And so I think that a lot of the pros and cons between these native plants versus bird feeders or bird houses have a lot more to do with preference and resources. So I think that, I mean, native plants all the way. Once you get those native plants in, you don't have to worry about anything else because it provides a lot of those great things for your birds. And you're going to see birds, you're going to see butterflies, you're going to see lots of insects. At the Michigan Audubon office, we started putting in native gardens. I think it's 2.5 years ago. And it's amazing to me. We had bird feeders out before. Birds weren't really coming to the bird feeders. We put in the native gardens and we haven't filled the bird feeder since. And I've seen more birds than I ever did before. So there's a lot to be said for native plants. I think it has a lot more to do with personal preference and resources than what's better.
I'm going to put a plug for the Institute. We do have a native plant sale in the spring. It'll be May, I believe, around the 20th of May this year. I don't remember the exact date right now, but we do have quite a few of those native plants that we are selling. So if you're interested in native plants and landscaping for birds, that's a great place to pick them up. So Jim did ask what power of binoculars is best for general birding. Before you answer that, though, I am going to say I will send out to the group. We have a beginner birder video that we made with the Berry County Bird Club that has some of that information as well as a good resource of how to get into birding. It also tells you how to connect with the Berry County Bird Club. So if you want to connect with a local bird club, I'll send that out with all the link to the video of this presentation and everything as well. So, but the best binoculars, oh, and the plant sales May 22nd. I love when people answer my questions. So, but the best binoculars for general birding.
Yeah, so I will actually double what you just said here too, Ellen, that the Berry County Bird Club, they're great birders. I have worked with them a lot and they are a great resource. And so I would definitely take advantage of that. In terms of binoculars, I hate this question. No, I don't mean that. Binoculars are really hard though, because there's a lot of personal preference and there are so many different styles and types out there. I will say in terms of magnification, it is typically easiest. I normally start young, like kids, with like 8x32. So 8x32 is typically the best place to start. And then it gives you a better idea of what you might like. 8x42 is also great, 8x32, 8x42. But that has to do more with like field of vision and that magnification strength. And so it can be really hard because it really can depend a lot on your personal preferences. And so I will also say that if you are looking at getting into birding, one of the best things you can do is either find somebody who you know who is a birder, who you can try out their binoculars, or go to a sporting goods or a camera store. So a lot of photography stores carry optics and a lot of sporting goods stores. And the optics you find at sporting goods stores may be geared more towards hunters, but you'll be able to get a feel for what you might like because a lot of times they have those products available in the store so that you can try them before you buy them. And it at least could give you a better idea of what you might prefer, because I know birders who prefer all kinds of different things. So that's why I don't like that question. It's so hard to answer because there really could be a lot of right answers.
Just like with everything. All right, let's ask one more question for fun. What is the most uncommon bird sighted in Southwest Michigan this winter? Do you have any idea? If you don't know this winter in general.
I don't actually know. I will say, I will actually expand upon my evening grosbeak plug, though, that I made earlier. I'm still hoping to see an evening grosbeak, and that would be a really unusual bird to see this time of year, any time of year, because they don't typically come down this far south. They're much more northern birds, and they're beautiful birds. They're absolutely gorgeous. But this is an eruptive year. So we're seeing evening grosbeak, we're seeing more red-breasted nuthatch, maybe even some pine siskin or crossbills that are coming down because they typically overwinter in the boreal forest, but there was a low cone crop this year, so there aren't as many seeds from the pine trees, and so they're moving further south to be able to find seed. And so that's a really big treat for a lot of us in the southern part of the state, because typically you would have to go north to be able to see them. And so this year, being an eruptive year, means that there are more of those more northern birds that are coming down, which is really exciting. I know, because I do have a feeder up, I get really excited all of the time because there's a curtain over the window by where I can see it, and I'll see these outlines of these birds. I'm like, is it a grosbeak? And then I'll be like, it's an American goldfinch. But I don't know until I open the blinds and can actually see those colors. So I think that that is definitely an exciting thing that's happening this year. And I know a lot of birders who are actively looking and can't wait for, to catch that taste of something that they wouldn't normally see in the winter.
It shows how everything is connected, and it can be like a scavenger hunt, which is exciting.
Right.
So I do want to mention, Jen said she's never participated in the bird count before, but she might this year. So I am going to put a plug one more time. Do try to participate in the bird count this year. Now that you've learned how to do it, that's the first step. If you need a place to bird, come out to the Institute. You can do it from your house, your backyard, local park. Try it out. It could be a lot of fun. So thank you so much, Lindsay. This was great, good information. So thank you guys for showing us. And I do see a great info, and thank you so much in the chat. So thank you, Lindsay, so much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys.